So why don't we say div primary for primary content area, and within here we'll have a p tag, and then we'll also set a sibling for a sidebar, and we're going to use the aside element because it's content that's related to the main content area or the primary content. And within here we will say maybe an unordered list, maybe we have some additional sub navigation, so maybe 6 list items, and we're going to say sub. Okay, so this gives us some gibberish content to get started. I'm going to come back now and reload, and we want to turn this into an actual website. So we are linking to those style sheets. If we want to make sure, we view source and click on them, and you can make sure that you are referencing them appropriately. If you receive a error page, you know that you might have made a mistake linking to it. If we open up the 960 framework, these are all the classes that we can work with. So don't let these confuse you. Mostly, they're just different ways to specify widths and padding. Now, the first step here, if you can see container, it has a width of 960 and it sets the margin left and right to auto, which we know will center it on the page. And this is important. The 960 framework is specifically made for websites that have a width of 960. It's been decided that that is a good number to compensate for all of the various computer screen resolutions. That's beginning to change, so you might want to consider a width of maybe 1120. But this works too. 960 is extremely common. Let's come back, and now let's apply that class. Wrap, and then container 12. Notice here that we can apply multiple classes by using a space. Now, of course, you cannot do that with IDs. You might be able to get away with it, but that's not what it's for. An ID should refer to one element, not to multiple. So let's keep it like so. And now if I load the page, refresh, you can see that that's now been centered on the page and it's been pushed over. If you were to apply a background color, you could really see this take shape. I'll do that right now for the example. Background, red. And there you go. You see you have a nice centered website. The next step is to maybe push the navigation to the top right. So let's open up style.css, and I'm going to override container 12 and apply that background color of red because I think it's easier to see the dimensions of what we're working with. The next step is within the header, why don't we specify that the h1 should have a class? And how can we set these? If we come back, look at all these different grids. Every grid is floated, and that's the way this is working. You create your columns by floating each section. And then it is overwritten where each grid, so grid 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 12 has a different width. So if I were to set the h1 class and we gave it a class of grid 4, we know that they need to add up to 12. So why don't we then make the navigation have a class of grid 8. 8 plus 4 equals 12, and this should take shape for us. And now, that takes up grid 4, and this will take up all the available space. And now if I highlight these, you can see that. So let's go into style, and we're going to say nav li display inline so that we can create a horizontal list. So that's fixed. Next, let's work on right here, main. So why don't we set a class of grid 8, and the aside will have a class of grid 4. And now that's moved it over slightly, but if we apply background colors again, we can really see the effect. So let's do that now. Aside, background is green, and primary content will have a background of a grayish color. Now this might look really odd to you. First, this is the main content. That should be on the left. So why is the sidebar on the right? That should be over here, right? And that's because this is not clearing anything above it. Right here, notice how this is lining up with the top here. It's not quite clearing it, so it gets stuck right here. If we want to fix that and clear it, we can either do it manually or 960 provides some classes. But also, we need to note that if we come back to our markup, because within our header, we have floated both the h1 and the nav, it has collapsed in on itself. We can verify this by going to style.css and setting a background color and seeing if that takes shape. Reload and notice it's nowhere to be found because it's collapsed. We can fix this by using the overflow hidden trick that we learned.